What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of the Chronicles of the Revolutionary Nerd. I am Cynthia, aka Cam McDonald.
I'm Andre Batts. Andre Batts, Motor City Black Age of Comics and Urban Style Comics.
Right on. One time for your. Never mind. Anyway, how you doing?
Had to get that in. I'm doing real good. How about yourself?
I'm doing splendiferous, wunderbar, all that other great stuff.
Mm.
How did you fare with your Memorial Day weekend?
Actually, I was working this weekend, that weekend, so I fared pretty good. I guess I was planning on sleeping the whole day, but I didn't get a chance to do that. But I had to go to plantation duties.
Oh, child, tell me about it.
Yeah, pretty fella.
I mean, well, like actually, Memorial Day weekend was like the first weekend that I was actually off in since March.
Wow.
And well, that's because like I've been doing like those vaccination events every weekend. So finally, like, they let us off that particular weekend. And then the following weekend, this weekend, I actually had nothing to do but to catch up on housework,
Okay.
you know.
Well, it seems like you've been doing a lot of working.
I don't know how else to do nothing else. I don't know how to do, I don't, mm, I do a lot of work. I work a lot. It's all good. It's all good. I guess we should just be grateful for um income. Yes, because
Right, right.
a lot of people don't have it. So, we're grateful for that. A lot of people
Yes,
lost.
a
Yeah.
lot of people are getting it for free too, so I guess it works either way.
True. Very true. Well, we have a special guest this week,
Hmm.
and we're going to be bringing him on very soon. I'm very excited about this conversation. And if anybody remembers from previous week, I actually made a clarion call to actually have this person join us, and they are here in the building. So grateful for that. But before we bring this brother on, let's get a little housekeeping done. So, people, if you are watching us, please hit that like button. Also, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so that you can get a notification every time that we upload an episode, premiere episode, or eventually when we go live with the episode. That will happen sooner than later. I have hope.
Yeah.
Indeed. And if you all like the content, if you like what we do rather, please consider being a Patreon. We do have Patreon links in the show notes below where you can actually support the Motor City Black Asia Comics, Urban Style Comics, your girl right here, all that other great stuff. And I believe, Andre, you got some merch. Is that correct?
Yes, I do. I
Yeah.
just currently released a line of T-shirts. I call it the RBG Collection, Urban Style Comics RBG Collection. It's featured for Juneteenth celebration, which is June 19th,
Hmm.
and I celebrate 1865, June 19th, throughout the whole month of June. So hopefully people can tie into my website, which is urbanstylecomics.com. Check out the new merch, and I have several T-shirts to choose from: black, white, red, whatever color as well. But feel free to check out my website and purchase something and celebrate Juneteenth with the rest of us.
Right on, right on. I'll be doing a little celebrating of Juneteenth myself. I will actually be in Atlanta the weekend of Juneteenth. We will be myself and my partner and the president of our political advocacy group will be supporting the sons and daughters of the freedmen as they do their reparations rally that particular weekend in Atlanta at the Georgia. I believe at the Georgia courthouse, like in
Mhm.
front of that particular area, the state Capitol building. So very excited about that. They will be speaking, and then I will be hosting a Juneteenth talk uh, that Saturday morning on Facebook. I will have like all that those link in my link tree as well. So if people want to go ahead and check that out and see. We'll be having two dynamic speakers, Dr. Valerie Spencer and Alice Hammond, who is a student of history. These ladies are bad and they know their stuff. And we're going to really get into the history of Juneteenth and the stuff that we don't know. And I will also be remiss if we did not remember and please give honor to those. This is the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre.
Mhm.
We did have the three remaining survivors actually testify in front of Congress to talk about their experiences and to still put a demand on this country for redress and repair because they've never received it for that. And
Correct.
and it's kind of crazy that I saw a lot of people in social media mention that they didn't even know about the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre until they saw like an episode of The Watchmen.
First episode, right? A lot of people was unfamiliar with Tulsa, Oklahoma, and what happened, what
Hmm.
transpired in Greenwood.
Correct.
And fortunately, with the Watchmen series, that first episode, it, it got a lot of people into reading up on it
Hmm.
and now and getting a better understanding of our lovely government and the things that they didn't back us up on. Because when it all transpired, government basically looked away.
They did. They did.
So a lot of people, they kind of seen it, and it's sad that they had to see it in a form of entertainment to actually know that it existed and it actually happened.
That
And
is so true.
yeah, people like myself, you, and others that have been sharing this information with people for years, and it takes something that's dramatized in order for them to accept it. It's being real.
Hmm. That's true. And like a lot of these things, and I keep that's why I keep on kind of just making this push that Black history really needs to be taught because Black history is American history.
Hmm.
And it's so unique because it's very much so quintessential to the soil and the fabric of this nation. I always say this. I was like, the United States would be nothing without Black people. It literally would be
Correct.
nothing without Black people, and all these particular inferences. And to me, and I've said this so many times, and I know that I'm going off on a tangent, but I just got to get this out. I'm so sorry. Hey, revolutionary nerd people, sorry, but
Yeah, that's why we call ourselves that.
yes, but because like we're so integral to this nation and we have been through so much, it still baffles my mind that we are still here and we are still we're survivors. And
Hmm.
to me that is like I just sit back in awe and wonder at Black people. I'm like, wow, we're still here. We're still making contributions. We're still, you know, um, contributing to the fabric of society.
Right.
We're still the pinnacle of what American culture is. I mean, and it's perpetuated all around the world. And we have a swagger and a flavor like none other. And it just I don't know. I just love my people, Andre. I really do.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Me too. But at this point, we really don't have a choice. No matter when you really put it in perspective,
Mm.
what are our choices?
Well, my choice is to be a revolutionary and fight for real equity and inclusion because we are here, and this is just as much as our country as anybody else's
Anybody else is correct,
because we built it. Damn it.
right? That's really our only choice.
Seriously. Well, we people could go on and on about this particular subject matter, but I
Yes.
believe that I really want to bring in our guests so that we can kind of continue our conversation. um, just like a brief introduction of this brother. Um, Met him at your con, Andre, the Motor City Black Age of Comics.
Mhm.
Well, I want to say like the last one that we did it in person, which was I want to say what 2018, 2019, something to that
Uh,
effect.
2008. He's been at the past couple of cons.
Hmm.
2018, 17.
Hmm. Yeah,
Keith also at 16. I'm not for sure. But he's been in
probably.
quite a few of them actually since. I think the 3rd year after its actual inception. So Keith's been around for a minute, and
Yes.
his lecture is profound, is powerful, and people come out to hear it. And when they hear it, it's like they'd be left, they're left in awe. Like, wow, I didn't even have a clue of this. Last week when we talked or whatever, we kind of touched on, we grazed it a little bit, but we thought that it would be best, to bring the professional
Correct. And for those who actually got a chance, and if you didn't see episode 3, we entitled it "White Characters Turn Black," where we talked about how different characters, including the new inception of Superman, is going to be black, and what type of dynamic does that bring? Um, does it is it relevant? Is it not? Does race matter when it comes to these particular spaces? And we also, kind of did a compare contrasting of, what is it like just to turn an established character black when they were white, rather than just actually using one that is already black, or you know touching base with people like yourself and other character or comic creators to use their particular characters in these particular universes.
on.
So I know that when I was at the last Motor City Black Asia Comic Con in person, Mr. Young, Keith Young, who will be coming to the stage momentarily, gave a dynamic lecture called The African Origins of Superheroes. And I did make a clarion call to him to actually discuss this, because I felt that it was a great follow up to our last conversation.
Mhm.
And he is here. He is here, people. So, if without further ado, let us please bring to welcome a round of applause virtually, Mr. Hero Keith Young. Yay! Your round of applause.
Keith in the house.
How
Hey.
are
Welcome, welcome.
you?
I'm very well. How about yourself?
Oh, doing great. Thank you so much
Mm.
for joining us to have this conversation. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation, and thank you for being so patient while we were trying to get this whole thing together. We
Okay.
really appreciate it so much.
I appreciate the
Yeah, it
invitation.
took
Thank
a
you for
minute.
having me on. All
Yes,
right.
Well, Keith, I'm glad you was able to make it onto the show as well. I was just sharing with the people, you've been a staple with the Motor City Black Age for maybe 10 years, I think. You've been
Yeah.
doing, African origins of white superheroes, African origins and mythology. You've been doing it for a minute.
Yeah.
And of
Since
course, I appreciate that.
2011. Yeah. I appreciate y'all. It's always been good working with you all, especially at the venue that the
Uh,
African Asia Comics. It's been awesome.
indeed, indeed. So let's just get right into it. Mr. Young, or Keith, or however you would like me to address you.
It's all the same. It's all
Oh,
good.
okay, cool. All right, Mr. Keith Young. So, I know that you mentioned, like, when you actually brought this whole particular lecture to the stage in the first place about doing like research. Can you please tell us like what interested you into the subject matter in the first place?
Well, I was looking for myself in history, like a lot of our great historians. We look for ourselves, and because we're not represented in the mainstream, comic books or religions as they are shown in their pictures and their imagery and in the movies. It's almost like black people didn't exist before slavery. If you just look at the narratives that were shown or that were taught in school, and I was very curious about what our people were doing before slavery.
Mm,
Before European colonialism. Okay, what were people doing around the earth, across
mm,
the earth?
mm-hmm,
Um, And come to find out, we were doing a lot of things. And it's very interesting that you all were having that conversation about now that there's this conversation of turning white characters black. But when you go back in time, before colonialism, you find out that the characters that we know and love today, like Superman, like Spider Man, like Thor, these characters are based on Afro-Indigenous stories, Afro-Indigenous mythology, legends, allegories, parables, these things that existed prior to Western civilization.
Mhm.
And it turns out the characters were originally dark skinned, brown skinned, black skinned, people that look like you and I. So the stories were actually originally appropriated by the people who made the movies, the people who made the comic books, people who were creating the imagery that we then, they showed it to us as if it was the reality of the situation, or as a fictionalized account. They used our stories as references, like many artists do. We don't just draw based on nothing. We have to draw based on some type of foundation. So
Mhm.
many artists, what they do is they use references. And that's not, there's actually no conspiracy at that level of the game. You're just talking about, well, where am I going to come up with some cool ideas?
Right.
And so many of the original comic book creators went to reference material that they had. And they changed the colors of the characters that they found when they looked at ancient Kemetic Egyptian mythology, where the name hero comes from Heru. Heru
Mm.
is a African king. He's very ancient, and he was like the ideal of what it was to be a man, to be a hero, to be a savior. That concept was 3,000 years old before Rome, before Greece. And so when comic books are being created, they use those type of source materials. And then what did they do? They changed the color to something that looked appropriate to them and that was gonna razzle and dazzle their children.
Mhm.
Um, um, and that's pretty much how things just kind of unroll, that way. But when you go all the way back, you find us, and I like to share that. So
Mhm.
Mhm. Nice. So, okay, you talked about
That's
like
real dope.
Haru. Yeah, it is. It is. And that's why I was just like, wow, really? Tell me more. But like, so let's so when we were talking about like these different characters that comic book creators back in the day actually used for source material, you mentioned Haru. Can you kind of give us a little bit more about who was Haru? What area did Haru come from, and also how what other areas did Haru actually show up?
that's a lot of questions right there.
I know, I know, and I'm thinking to
Okay.
myself, I should have broke that up. I'm sorry. Let's just start out. Who Tell us more. Who is
You should have
Haru
just
and where did he
the
come
origins of
from?
Heru.
Right. Yeah. Let's go. Let's talk. Let's dive into Haru. Haru himself.
Well, Haru, once again, he's like a prototype for the hero character. He is like his story is it mirrors the Lion King story. His father was the king. His father's name was Osar or Osiris, that was, as he was known to the Greeks. His father was murdered by a conspiracy of his brother, along with several other conspirators, and they took over his father's kingdom. And they forced Haru and his mother, Auset Isis, into hiding, because they were going to take control of the mother and the child, which was supposed to come back and redeem the father, or come back and avenge the father, if you will.
Hmm.
So you have a lot of interesting stories there. You have the original hero. You have a king kicked out of his kingdom, and he winds up getting raised in a swamp. So there's a storyline that goes throughout our history of heroes and heroines who were once at a very high status, and then they find themselves in the slums, in the sewers, in the gutters, in the ghettos, and nobody knows who they are. Everybody treats them like dirt and like they don't exist, and they have to grow up under those circumstances in order to become a hero, in order to become a savior. Um, and I find a lot of interesting correspondences between that ancient story and the story of Black people in America, quote unquote. When you
Mm.
when you correspond that to who we really are and
Mhm.
how we're treated today, and how we
Mhm.
find ourselves looked at in society, and we have more power than we have been taught, than we've been
Mm.
taught to believe in ourselves. We have more creative and imaginative and spiritual power than we can even imagine. If we really could tap into it, it would be super.
Mm.
So there's a lot of correspondences there. Haru being the avenger of his father Osiris. Well, you have
Mhm.
a comic book called Avengers. The Avengers are super characters who get together to protect the United States, to protect the country. If they can't protect the country, then they go out and get the bad guy who did something to the country in order to set things back in order, in order to set uh, I guess it's the cosmic order, right makes, make everything right again. Okay. Was this very similar circumstance with Haru having to learn how to be a hero? He has to go through a process of learning. Education is very important. He has to learn how to master his mind, his emotions, and his spirit.
Mm.
Um, Haru was one of the original Jedi, Jedi like from Star Wars Jedi.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
another franchise that actually picked up some African mythology and used it and represented it as if it were a Western European creation. However,
Mhm.
the Jedi were priests and priestesses from Africa, and they were very similar in concept to the Jedi in the movies,
Mm.
um, in that they use spiritual power that
Mhm.
they call um, the Force.
Right.
They actually hijacked everything from the story. It's actually
Mhm.
what really was called the Force in Africa. That you can tap into this force of energy that's all around us.
Uh-huh.
That's made up of we're made up of it, and it's made up of us. And there's a real connection there. There's some real stories. There's some real mythology that starts with people who look like you and I that got retranslated into Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Princess Leia. Um,
So I have a question concerning that. Now, even though I'm more of a Star Trek fan than a Star Wars fan, okay, live long and
okay.
prosper, health and long life to you, all right?
I
However,
get it. I get it.
but where, because of course, like I know that a lot of times people liken Africa to like a country, but it's really not. It's a continent with 54 countries
Okay.
and lots of tribes with different dialects and depending on where you are within that region, you had like different civilizations that kind of like develop differently. So when we're talking about specifically the Jedi, who were like the priest and the priestess who kind of like guarded these secrets of the Force. Can you remember what region that particular story or that allegory was borrowed from when they created these particular characters?
Well, once again, you actually find those stories all over the earth, in different forms, with slightly different names.
Hmm.
But there was at one time and a tradition. It's debatable where it began. Some say it
Okay.
began in the Nile Valley civilization, which would begin in Ethiopia, Kush, and then go upward into Kemet and Egypt and
Okay.
Libya, northern Africa.
Okay.
Some say it began in the Indus Valley region, which is the India that you know of,
Hmm.
Mesopotamian culture, Sumerian culture. And then there are some who say that the stories actually began in the Americas,
Hmm.
around South America, and that they were imported into uh, Africa from the Americas. Some are saying that the stories actually went the other way. So that's a little bit debatable where the stories began, but it's a fact that the stories are all over the earth, and you find them in Mesopotamia, Babylon, this Kemetic civilization, India, Kush. You find them in Australia. You find them in America, North and South America. Different versions of the story with slightly different, character names based on, the different dialects that people were speaking. But the story was actually all over the earth.
Hmm.
Um, that um, where it came from. I haven't been able to ascertain. Everybody wants to know where ground zero is, and according to science, according to the latest Western science, everything begins in Africa, right? Um, but there's still some debate about the origins of civilization, whether or not there's a single point of origin, or whether or not we all came from the earth
Hmm.
where we were born. So
Hmm. That's a
So,
philosophical
so
question.
yeah, they're still under the concept that we just up everywhere all at once.
No, we didn't.
I think that's what that is.
okay,
But I want to
Like,
kind
I'll,
of go back into the Heru or whatever a little bit.
okay.
uh, you know, because I know we can go on and on, 'cause, like keep different debates and theories going on as far as civilization is concerned, and where everything started or whatever. Um, Keith, you brought up the Jedi. I like that you brought that up because it's a brother that wrote a book called Magi, the Spiritual Warriors. A brother named Infadishi. He
Hmm.
wrote a book on that. It ties into the concept of Yoda and the Jedi and them learning different forms of arts as far as not necessarily martial arts because they didn't call it martial arts. It was a form of
Hmm.
fighting as well as a spiritual path in order for them to become kings and accept their kingship in the land of Kemet or Kush or these different areas, Ethiopia and so on and so forth. Have you ever heard of that book before?
I have heard of that book. I don't have that one, but I do have another book by the same brother. And it's around. I actually have it right around here. It's darn it. I have a book by him by that same brother. He was speaking
It's
about
like
the
a
similar
500
thing.
page book.
No, the one I have is about 250 pages. I think it was one of his. I'm not sure where that book is on his chronology, but he's written more than one book. Um,
Right.
Anyway, yes, I'm familiar
I
with
met
his
the
work
brother.
and I'm familiar with the concept. And he's very deep in that book. What he's
Oh
sharing
yeah.
in there is actually historical fact, and
mm,
Right.
he backs
Exactly.
it up, using the
Right.
language, using the mythology, and using the spiritual tradition, the oral history. I mean, we have it
Hmm.
down to you can see the pictures on the wall we were
Right.
doing martial arts, we were learning, we were doing math, we were doing advanced math, not just we were doing like calculus and trigonometry level math to engineer the pyramids and things
Right.
of such. We were not slothful, we were not ignorant, we were not backwards, we were not primitive. At one time across the earth, we had very high levels of civilization, and we gave birth to the liberal arts, the esoteric arts, the things that everybody kind of goes goo goo gaga over today. Is that
Correct.
actually very old? All the things that now yoga is a big thing. Now meditation is a big thing. Now sage and things like that. It's like they're selling. They figured out a way to monetize and sell back our original cultures to us.
Hmm.
And just they just put another name on it, another face. Um,
well,
so
Right.
there's
speaking of yoga,
Hmm.
I am a huge fan. I am a yogi, and
all right.
yes, namaste, looking face.
Correct.
now, now, so and it's kind of interesting, like
Right.
how you bring up spirituality. Now, depending on who you're speaking to, and maybe what they believe or what have you. Spirituality can be extremely broad, right? However, there is a term, a Sanskrit term, uh, I believe in Hindi or Hindu language, called prana,
Hmm.
which means breath,
Mhm.
and that is also have been correlated, to the spirit, right? So,
Hmm.
like, if like a person like talks about being endowed with the spirit, they're really talking about being endowed with breath.
Spirituality.
and
Hmm.
and then also, like, if they are saying, well, they gave up the
Right.
spirit, they mean they gave up their breath. They're no longer breathing. um
Hmm.
and so, I kind of found it very fascinating when talking about these
Mhm.
particular topics, right? And we bring that up, that oftentimes, like, spirituality, like, well, what does that really mean? Like, some people, like, I don't know what that means, right? But
Yeah.
but sometimes, like, when you correlate it with, like, in its simplest form, and I am
Mhm.
KIS, keep it simple, stupid,
Mhm.
right? In its most simplest form, I can definitely, see the correlation, with that particular terminology when it comes
Mhm.
to the breath. And also too, even when we're going back to this whole Jedi thing,
Right.
I know that oftentimes, especially like when we're talking about mastering like martial arts, that's like the first thing that you focus on is breath. Even in yoga, like, you know we're getting a breathing rhythm going on before we even start a flow, right? And I noticed that that's oftentimes like a concept that you would see that is carried from culture to culture, to culture, especially in very ancient cultures.
Hmm.
Now, I want to segue into one of my favorite people, because you talked about her a little bit in your lecture, and that would be Wonder Woman.
Okay.
Uh, Matter of fact, wasn't that our first, our one of our last
That's
two,
our
our
first.
first
Yes.
episode? Oh, yes, we talked about, we compared Wonder Woman to the 2017 to the sequel, which the 1984, and how I know I was like really excited when the trailer came out, because sis was like riding on lightning, and then you found out that that movie was hot garbage, but that's neither here nor there. But I was so disappointed. But I know that, like, you spoke about her, and specifically the Amazons,
Yeah.
and how they have like an origin, an African origin as well. Can you expound on that a
Yeah.
little bit?
Certainly. Um, it's all once again, it's all connected. When you talk about our mythology, it's you're looking for correspondences. So what looks similar, um, and it's all over. So the Amazons were, once again, they're an African original. Um, Amazon itself means mother of the sun. Amma means mother, and Zan means son. And so we had an ancient tradition of our mothers and our sons. That was a part of our spiritual tradition. And
Mm,
you'll also note that Ma and son, if you take those two words and smash them together, you get Mason. And the Masons are a secret society or secret organization,
mhm,
which has its origins in Africa as well. Um, a lot of this has to do with the Amazons were builders. They were not just warriors. They would go once they would go and wage war on a place. They would begin to build and engineer new infrastructure for the people. They
mhm,
were peacekeepers. They were a community-based organization, and so as builders, uh, the secrets of masonry for how to set a plumb line, for how to how to stay on the level, how to make sure that a house or a domicile doesn't sink into the earth or fall over. All those sacred secrets, um, over time, became corrupted and recolored and shown as something else. But that was a science that the Amazons actually, masonry is what I'm saying,
mhm,
is something that's one of the biggest secrets about it is that it's based around black mothers and their sons. And the
Interesting.
Wonder Woman was um, the concept came from the fact that a lot of Amazonian cultures were strictly feminine. They
Mm,
would separate themselves, and they lived in different places in the Aegean Sea, which is around Greece and northern Africa, um, where they set themselves apart from men as these warrior societies. And that tradition is steeped in the goddess tradition. So Diana, the goddess Diana, is actually a goddess, and so that once again would be like the reference material that the comic book creator used to create Wonder Woman.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so Diana was originally an African deity, and she became very well known in Italian society. Um, so that's the story of Wonder Woman.
Which deity, specifically from Africa, was she represented as? Do you know?
Well, like I said, Diana would be one. Another name is Artemis,
Mhm,
um,
mhm. That's the Greek
and
name,
that's the
right?
Greek name.
Yeah.
Um, however, the Greeks imported, or the Greeks got the knowledge of Artemis from Africa. So they imported a lot of their deities from different places.
Mhm,
And Artemis or Artemis, um, or Athena, they're all a part of the same goddess family, if you will.
mhm,
They were hunters and they were warriors. They were trained in the skills of strategy and warfare. And they were
mhm,
also oracular priestesses, which means that they were able to speak directly as the goddess, for the goddess.
mhm.
And more importantly, they were actually the guardians of entire cities. And now this is something that can be historically verified that
Okay.
like Athens, Greece, for instance, the guardian of Athens, Greece is the goddess Athena. There are
Right.
temples built to Athena in Athens, Greece,
Mhm,
and she is and she always has been the guardian of that area.
mhm,
So the spiritual guardian and at one time the physical guardian, her priestesses would act as her avatars to protect the actual city. Now
mhm,
that's a really big deal. It's like a lot of historians just speed right past that and
mhm,
don't stop to say that there were full blown female warriors who were the guardians of entire cities.
mm,
And this wasn't just it was this was they did it in Greece, they did it in Rome, they did it in Egypt, they did it in Libya, they did it in Mesopotamia. Every one of those major civilizations with their city states, they were all protected by women, all
hmm,
protected by goddesses. Every goddess was the guardian of the gateway to her home, whether that was by land, air, or sea.
hmm,
Now, that's historically verifiable. You can go to all these countries in around what they call the Middle East and the Mediterranean and Africa and these Grecian countries, and every single one of them had a goddess who is the guardian of that city.
Interesting, interesting. Is it so? Okay, so this kind of leads me to my question, and then, like, and you kind of like segue us into your current research now. Well, though you're wrapping up research, so like oftentimes, like if you look at specifically ancient Greek pottery, art, things of that nature, sometimes you do happen to see characters that are explicitly dark in skin color.
Hmm.
In some cases, they are like completely blacked,
Yes.
blacked out in their skin color.
Hmm.
Um, can you kind of talk about the correlation as far as like since you mentioned about how like some of these particular gods and goddesses were imported from different regions in Africa to like Greek civilization, Roman civilization, and then they kind of showed up in that color. So what's the correlation there? Can you kind of dive into that a little bit?
I'll try. Well, once again, their origin they began black.
Hmm.
All these characters and gods and goddesses, heroes and heroines that we're talking about, they all began dark. There was some point in time when the complexion of the world began to change, and more. They, according to scientists, according around the ice ages, and people that live further from the sun, there may have even been some genetic engineering involved, but you know,
Mm.
you have a preponderance of white people on the scene. And as they come into power, they repurpose these older stories, which they have to build their civilization on. There's nothing else to build on.
Mhm.
So they took the old stuff and they made it in their own image.
Mm.
As they made it in their own images, these images began to get wider and wider. It didn't
Mhm.
happen overnight. There were a few things that contributed to this happening.
Okay.
Um, First, you have the religious um, coming of age of Christianity.
Mm.
When Christianity was on the rise, the conscious level of the planet was like it had plummeted to an all-time low to the point where they called it a dark age,
Dark
which means
ages,
that
yeah.
we were lost in ignorance.
Mhm.
And what they did was they began the suppression and destruction of information because
Mm.
information is power. Knowledge is power. Information. So what they did was they had these different points in history where they began to have these movements they called the iconoclast. What they would do is destroy the icons that they considered to be pagan or heathen. Those icons were the icons of gods and goddesses and spirits who look like us.
Mm.
So you have a destruction of the old. And then what they began to do was they had monks and monasteries who would sit for hours. They had them sitting for hours and days on end, rewriting and recoloring history.
Yeah.
So that happened a couple times in history where we had this destruction of history and then the recoloring of it. Um, uh, Outside of religion, then you had that happen with the Renaissance era when you have this. Um, it actually was sparked by um, Europeans coming into contact with African art and African philosophy, the Renaissance era. Um, but as the artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, they're once again they're using the mythology as their reference point, but
Mhm.
they're using people who look like them as the models for the
Mm.
characters. So
Mhm.
that's where we get the white versions of Jesus, the white versions of Zeus, the white versions of Thor, the white versions of all these different characters that we know so well today.
Mhm.
You can see a progression over time of how these characters became wider and wider because the artist creating them became wider and wider.
Mhm.
And they put those in front of us after our civilization was destroyed. We had our
Mhm.
own icons, we had our own pictures and images, and the same thing happened to us. First
Mhm.
thing when Western civilization arrives to American shores, they want to know where's the books, where's the records, who your people are, where your totem poles are.
Yeah.
A lot of our art was based around. It wasn't. We didn't think of it as art. These were our spiritual tools,
Mhm.
and they took those totem poles and burnt them up, or put them in storage somewhere, or they're
Mhm.
they're locked away. Those images that belong to us are in the Library of Congress, in the archives. They're in the
Yeah.
Vatican, in the basement. There's a
Ooh,
lot of places
child,
where
talk
we
about
can find these images. They're not just there. It's like you have
it.
to go
Right.
looking for it. You need a
Right.
researcher or investigator,
Mhm.
historical detectives that have to go searching for this stuff to
Mhm.
bring it back out into the light. We have this amazing technology where now we're not beholden to ABC, NBC, these major networks to show us what reality is. We could talk to each other on, StreamYard and Zoom and share this information. So it's still there. It's not gone. They did their best to destroy it, to distort it. However, there's still breadcrumbs that lead right back to the originators, which is
You
a
know,
lovely
it's
thing.
it's funny that you mentioned that. Not haha, but like, huh, funny. It's some thinking that a couple things. I remember watching a documentary about uh, Egyptian civilization, specifically when it was taken over by Kushite kings and
Mm,
how they ruled for over 100 years. But when the original dynasty of, I forgot exactly who it was that rose up against the last king, the great grandson of the original overtaker, they tried to destroy the the records that these Kush kings actually ruled in Egypt in the first place.
Hmm.
But you can't get rid of everything, right? There's still like some inferences to this particular history. So they say, wait a minute, like you mentioned, breadcrumbs, right? And it's also interesting how you mentioned, like specifically saying that that's not art to us, right? A lot of those like art pieces and statues and all these different things that we saw, including like totems, because like totems weren't just here in like in the Americas. You saw them over in African countries as well. Those were like textbooks. Those were like ways for you to actually tell the history of a tribe, of a people, of an area, so that they can keep those particular traditions alive. Because I know that they did, talk, they told them orally, but those icons were ways in order for them to be able to, give the story more emphasis. I
That's
like
right.
saying emphasis instead of emphasize. So there you go.
Those are memory tools for one. At the most basic level,
Mhm.
what you could do with something like a totem pole is look at the animals and the hieroglyphs, and they remind to the griot. Those are reminders for different parts of the story. So
Right.
as you said, we would use those. Those are like our. If you ever heard of the Akashic records,
Mhm.
the Akashic records are supposedly the spiritual, like a spiritual memory base, right? Well, Akasha is a tree. They're a real tree. And we
Mhm.
use them as totem poles. We use them to literally write our history on those trees. So
Mhm.
there is a spiritual correspondence and a real life physical correspondence. So our griots will look at those trees, the images that were carved on them, and they could tell the history of their people from the beginning as they understood it,
Mhm.
right? And that's part of what we call oral tradition. Um,
Indeed.
and that's a really big deal for us as
I don't
people.
Go ahead,
I
Andre.
don't think much of the Kush uh, empire was ever really destroyed because they had so much in common with Kemet, Egypt. Even though they ruled for 100 years, you have to think Kemet was in existence for 5,000 years. They have been 100 years. That's very minute. So the culture was basically the same. It was just a little different. So they didn't really destroy much of Kush. Unlike we can't think of it like when Rome or when Alexander the Great, or what as they call him, the Great, went over into Kemet and destroyed and pillaged and all that kind of stuff. Because when Kemet was ruled by Kush and the Nubians or whatever, it wasn't that much different as far as
Mhm.
the culture, the gods, and things of that nature. They matched them up for the most part. You got Amen, you got Ra in the lower parts of Kemet, and then you end up with Amen and Ra. When Kush basically was out of power. I don't think much
Yeah,
of that was erased out of history, as some people try to make it out to be.
no, it was more so that in Kemet.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, it was more so like in Kemet when the original like dynasty took it back over from the Kush kings. They tried to get rid of the lineage of the Kush kings that ruled in that area, but they definitely couldn't get rid of everything, and they definitely could not get rid of the imprint that Kush itself had in that entire region. I mean, remember, like they had trading going between Nubia and Kush and Kemet for like
Right, Ethiopia, right, for thousands of years.
millenniums, millennia, right? Exactly.
Right.
So yeah.
So
Their
with that being
culture.
said, Keith, would you say that good?
No, what I say that what cultures once upon a time, they had a lot to do with memory, and they were, it was a big deal to be remembered. Like
Mhm.
if they remembered your name, then that was a form of immortality. So that
Mm.
was one of the reasons why them and the Nile Valley civilization, they went to such great lengths to, entomb themselves and to memorialize themselves, because a person, your family remembering your name, um, that's why the ancestors, venerating your ancestors, was a very important thing, because to
Mhm.
remember the names of your people is a form of power, is a form of immortality. So when you're talking about rulership, one of the things that the rulers of different dynasties have did do from time to time was they would erase the historical records or the images of rulers who came before them, and they
Mm.
were doing that in a deliberate effort to erase their name from not just history but from eternity. Like,
Hmm.
we don't want you to be remembered, nothing about you to be remembered. No one will ever speak your name again. Those were the type of curses that we would say to our predecessors or to someone else, like, or to a rival. It was almost very similar to like rap battles today. Like when the new guy comes, the new hot guy, he's like, I don't want anybody to remember anybody who came before me. You just don't remember me.
Mhm.
Um, that's how the attitude kind of was at times in some of our civilizations, where we would get to the point where we would want to erase the legacy of our predecessors or someone who was a rival, so that others would focus on you. So that wasn't some of the things that have happened historically with the destruction of certain historical artifacts. Wasn't all the white man. Some of it was some of the things that we were doing to one another, in
Mm.
an attempt to erase the legacies of, once again, predecessors or rivals.
Mhm. Interesting, interesting.
Just
So,
something to bear in mind.
we're
Right, right.
bearing. We're bearing. So,
I
so
did
like,
have that one question.
go ahead, go ahead,
Keith, would you
Margie.
say that I know you spoke on the Amazons and Wonder Woman. Would you say that the gods that they basically followed for the most part was Hathor of Kemet?
So, what was the question again?
So would you say that the goddess that they patterned themselves after was Hathor?
Oh yes, yes. So,
As far as
Hathor would be
okay,
Hathor is one of the originals. Yes, she's the goddess. She's the queen of heaven. She her Kemetic name is Het Heru, which means the house of Heru. She is the mother of
Haru,
heroes, the mother of Heru. Um,
correct,
she has two major aspects. One is the queen of heaven. The other is the queen of the damned. She is simultaneously the
right,
avenger of Ra and the destroyer.
Mm.
Because once again, we have a superhero concept. She can transform herself from this queen of heaven
correct,
into a ferocious, lion-headed beast that can uh, that no army can stand against. She was an unstoppable warrior, and she almost
right,
destroyed civilization twice.
Mm.
That's on record. Um, um, so she is a very powerful character, and so yes, in her line under Het Heru or Hathor, you would have
right,
Osset, Isis. You would Isis fall under her. Aphrodite is
mhm,
another goddess who is actually a version of Het Heru.
right,
Venus, the goddess Venus, is another version of Het Heru. Um, Artemis, Athena, they're all versions of Het Heru and one of her aspects, whether it's the queen of heaven or the queen of the earth or the queen of the underworld. The
Mm.
underworld in
mhm,
Kemet is called Amenta. And
right,
Amenta, here's something else that's very interesting. Amenta in Kemet is known as the West. And Amenta was thought of as heaven. Now, I want you to think real hard about what was going on here in the Americas at the same time. They kind of erased that part from history, or that's very vague when it comes to Western history. But
Mhm.
Amenta, they was talking about over here.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Well, I often just think of as human beings as like a bunch of nomads. Like, when we kind of like all were like within, Pangea, Africa, Central, and then we just kind of like parted out, right? And there's always going to be like similarities and even like some etymology will come, with our language. Because like we take these stories where we go and then they just become like in different inferences and so on and so forth. So it makes
Mhm.
perfect sense to me that, one culture will borrow from another because they kind of like brought it with them when they ended up where they are, right?
Yeah.
But since we're on this subject matter of goddesses, we should talk about your latest research, or the closing of your latest research, that is talking on your book, Black Goddesses, Legacy of Sacred Feminine. Legacy of the Sacred Feminine, rather. So, can you tell us a little bit more about that book and the research behind it, and kind of what inspired you to go this particular route?
Yeah. So yeah, the name of the book is Black Goddess: Legacy of the Sacred Feminine, and it came from a question I had as a child, about. I was raised as a Christian, and I was taught that there was God the Father, and He had a Son that He loved so much, but He had to sacrifice him.
Hmm.
And I was wondering where. I'm like, there's a God the Father and a God the Son. Where's His mom?
Mm,
And the answer I got was He didn't have a mom, not in heaven anyway. Like, he didn't have a mom. That doesn't make any sense. I have a mom. I'm a little boy. I have a mom. I wonder what this mom thinks about this sacrifice idea. 'Cause I'm like, it had to be the father who came up with that. So
right.
what did his mom think about? I'm a little boy. Like, he sacrificed his son. I'm like, this is not a good idea. So, um, anyway, that answer never satisfied me. And as I got older and began to do this historical research, I was able to find out the identity of the Holy Ghost, and that is the mother.
Mm,
But I couldn't get anybody to believe me. Nobody that went to church, none of my people, nobody wanted get out of here, right? So since nobody would believe me, that made me go and get more research, more information about you know who the Holy Ghost was, and as I'm looking for the Holy Ghost, I kept finding these mother goddesses.
mm,
And of course, I started finding them in Africa with like Isis was the first one. Um, but then that grew to Heteru or Hathor, as Andre mentioned, and learning about how old their traditions were and how they actually predated Christianity,
mm,
Judaism, and Islam. And I found this tradition of this mother goddess all over the earth. It was like, wait a minute, first there was supposed to be no mother goddess, as far as I was taught when I was a
mhm,
child.
right.
Now I'm finding her everywhere. So
Mm,
I'm like, wait a minute, she's all over, all points, all four corners of the earth. There's a goddess, and so I kept finding her, and it's like, okay, I gotta just as I'm doing my research, I'm like, this is groundbreaking and on so many levels because I'm like, what they teach, my black mothers, my black sisters, that there was no goddess, so there is no representation of the female in divinity. There in the Christian concept that we're taught in this country,
right.
that's
That's
most of us
true.
get taught as a baseline. Whether
That's true.
that changed over time, that so be it. But I know I was indoctrinated with a book that said there was no mother goddess,
That's
right?
right.
And so to come to find out there is, that's a big deal, I think, because it has to do with a woman's place in the sacred Godhead. It has to do with a woman's place in the cosmos, in the family. It
Mm,
actually, I mean, it made so much more sense to find out that women do have a place, and a very significant one. I mean, to the point where there's no existence without the feminine, without the sacred feminine. Finding all this information out, it made so much more sense than what I was being taught. And I'm
mhm,
like, okay, I got to share this then. if I have to share the names, the dates, the temples, the locations, all of that. I have to put this somewhere for people who are curious like myself to find it and to
Mhm.
be able to follow those breadcrumbs and say, wait a minute, okay, I am divine. There is divinity in my mother. That was for
Mhm.
me. I'm a son. They told me my mother wasn't divine. Matter of fact, they told me my mother, according to the story of Eve, she brought. It's because of her that we live in a horrible state. It's because of
Yeah.
a mistake that a woman made at the beginning of time
Yep.
that everything is messed up in the world.
Yep.
And that
Yes.
included my mother. And that gave everybody, all the guys at church, they could say, well, if they couldn't default to anything else, they could say, well, it was Eve's fault that we're in the situation that we in anyway. So, I mean, that's a horrible thing. That's a horrible weight to put on any. I'm like, it just didn't make sense.
Mhm.
When in my own personal experience with my mother, my grandmother, the women in the church was contradicted everything I was being taught about women in the
Mm.
church. And so it just became very important to me. It was like something was on me I found this information to put it together so that I could share it with my mothers and my sisters and my people to help us to help us get back to our original mind. It's like we lost our natural
Mm.
black minds when we were introduced to European colonialism. It was snatched from us through that process, and we've been slowly going through a process of getting our minds back together. And I
Mhm.
believe that this information is going to go a long way to restoring um, that missing piece, the missing pieces of history that have to do with the fact that black women are divine. They were not the cause of all the world's calamity, um, and that they, beyond just gods and goddesses, you're talking about guardians, you're talking about teachers, you're talking about midwives and nurses and doctors and researchers, and there were so many roles that women played in our ancient cultures
Mhm.
that are very important that we know today. So that was my reason and rationale for putting this all together. And like I said, I kept finding, I still keep finding it. The thing is, there's so much. I'm at the point where I have over 400 pages of this stuff, and I could keep going, but it's like I have to call it quits somewhere,
So,
to put something out because there's literally libraries full of information about goddesses that just has been kept from us, and
Right.
it's just waiting, it's bursting. I can't wait to get share more of this information because I feel like it's going to have a healing effect on women, particularly in our community. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel that that's so important because once the women are healed, it's also going to help. It's not purely like I'm just out for the ladies because healed women make for healed men, and I want to have
Healed Nation.
live in a
A healed
community, right?
nation.
A healed
Yeah.
nation, right? We're
Yeah.
able to look at each other in our proper character.
Yeah. That is so important. I mean, even though like I was raised
Mm.
Christian too. I'm not a believer. I am an atheist and also a secular Buddhist. However, um, there is definitely a missing link when it comes to how we look at ourselves. And I know that a lot of that had to do with, the interruption when it came to white supremacy that has shown up in, through the transatlantic slave trade, through colonization, through good old fashioned racism, all those different things. And like the first thing that happens oftentimes is take away your stories, take away your culture, take away your language, and then you become what we want you to be. And, then you have like the changing of iconography. Like you're going to accept our God, not yours, right? You're going to accept our origin story, not yours. And and I really also believe that it has very much so created a rift on how we not only see ourselves, but how we even interact with one another, specifically Black men and Black women. Um, I find it like a a rise in our brothers who are, kind of at odds, with women, but I also see it on the other side too. Women that's at odds with men, and it seems like that for a lot of it is that we talk at each other instead of to each other, and I think a lot of it has to do with because we don't see each other as even if I granted divine, I'm trying to come up with a better term, but I can't right now. So we're just going to go with that, okay? Because, because like divine doesn't necessarily mean a god, right, or a deity.
Mhm.
It could just mean that you see yourself, not necessarily holy, but whole. You know, you see
Yeah,
yourself like not scattered, right?
yeah,
And with that, wholeness becomes, with healing, and I don't necessarily think that we really see each other like that, and that causes us to kind of like have a very skewed um perception of one another. So I'm very grateful that you've done this research and are really talking about this. Hopefully can like help even like heal some of my sister's minds because sometimes I just want to give her like, come here, sis, let me you need a hug right now.
yeah.
So you also created like some characters that I believe that you are talking about in this particular book too. Like, did you and you sent some to me, so I was
Yes,
hoping that we
yes.
can
So,
kind of.
yeah, I
Well,
fully illustrate. So, I now beyond the research, I did some research and I wrote the
well,
book, but
most
I
definitely.
also created the graphics.
Hmm. So let's talk about this lady right here.
All right, that is a shot. That is an image of the goddess Seshat. And she is a Kemetic Egyptian deity of numbers and accounting and record keeping. So as such, she knows all the secrets, and she is the one who, um, in their society, when you reach the afterlife, it was her or her husband Thoth or Tahuti who read back the book of your life, the the information about your accomplishments, or your failures, your attributes and detriments, and, the things that you were able to accomplish. She is the cosmic record keeper.
Mm.
And I found her because I was looking for a goddess of numbers. Like, who's the goddess of numbers? And I kept looking, and there isn't one. Like, I couldn't find one for a while until I stumbled across this shot. And I learned that she was the goddess associated with numbers and their vibration. And if you're into meditation or using like solfeggio frequencies or Nikola Tesla and his secrets of 369 and all of those secrets of the numbers, you can trace back their origin of the secrets to Seshat. Um,
Interesting. I
so
love meditation. I never knew it had anything to do with numbers. I mean, like I was familiar with like vibrations and things like that, and of course, like I studied music. Do re mi fa sol la ti
there you go.
do.
No, number is music.
This is
Music
true.
music is number in motion.
This is
So,
very true.
um,
Okay, well let's talk about this lady right here.
Right.
oh, all right. So that is an image that I created of Offset Isis, and I made that image after I saw the Black Panther movie.
Mm,
Um, and I love the movie, but I did have one problem with it,
what's
and
that?
the one problem was there was a scene when the general Okoye, the warrior, she was supposed to protect the king and the queen. Um, well, anyway, when the Black Panther, they thought he was dead, and they're going to get the queen and her daughter. They're trying to escape,
Hmm.
and one of the characters is like, "Okay, General, come with us," and she's like, "No, I have to stay here and protect the throne." And she pointed at this chair that the Black Panther was sitting in.
Hmm.
And she stayed there and left the mother, the queen and the mother to go on their own. And I was throwing popcorn at the screen like, no, 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 because in in African culture and tradition, in Kemetic culture, the mother, the queen herself, is the throne,
Mm,
not the chair. The
Mhm.
chair is
mm,
just
Correct.
is just a symbol.
mhm,
And so that image is called "Watch the Throne," and it's important to know that once again in our culture we weren't just talking about like empty things. Like we weren't. I know they teach you that we were idol worshippers and object worshippers and things like that, but those were just the memory device to
mhm,
remind you of the real thing. The
mm.
real thing, the real throne, is the mother. In the movie, the general should have went with the queen.
Right.
When
Right.
the queen actually went to the rival king to say,
Mhm,
"Hey, the Black Panther is dead," what she was actually in African culture, my man was the new Black Panther. Then she just
mm,
offered herself to a whole nother king.
mhm.
That was the real throne. When she did that, the movie could have went a whole different way.
This is
And and
true.
Baku, that guy, when she said, "Hey, protect us," and he said, "Okay, I'll protect you." My man was the king. And,
Mm.
and and if it was like based on the real, reality,
Yes.
of course it was movies and cinema and all that. So,
It's
right, but
Marvel.
right, that's where I got the inspiration to create that
It's
image. Though.
right.
Nice.
It's
Nice.
interesting that it, it's interesting that you use that analogy. You brought that up because when you think of the glyph that actually represent Offset, the chair, and you have the all-seeing eye with the flail that represent
Mhm.
Offset and Kemetic glyphs. So
Yeah,
that's like right on point in what you said as far as the throne and her, being a protector of the throne, but it's somebody that's part of that throne, which is the king and the queen mother that she totally went against in the movie. But like you said a minute ago, it's all Hollywood, Marvel, blah blah blah. But at the same
yeah,
time, we actually know what it meant. I got you on
yeah.
that. That's good. I can't wait to get the book, but I'm listening
Yeah, I thought it was important. I actually put that information verbatim in the book, where I
Mm.
spoke about the
here. Okay.
movie and I related it to the original, the real African tradition, where and explain what the throne really is in our culture, how we looked at that,
Hmm.
Mhm.
because that's important to know. It's
Mhm.
important to know.
Yeah, I didn't. I see. I didn't even know that. So thank you for
Sure.
enlightening me.
No.
We got a couple of. Oh, so I know like my name is Cynthia. Um it's a Greek name. And it also, and I believe like the Roman inference is Diana, which also we, correlate with Artemis. And you
Hmm.
got this girl right here,
Yes.
this lady right here. So let's talk a little bit more about this Artemis.
Artemis is a goddess of the bow. She was a huntress, and she was a goddess of fertility rites, um, which um, which means she liked to run around in the woods and have half naked with the animals and hunting and having fun and shooting things with her bow and arrow. And today, they would call that a tomboy.
Mm,
She was not concerned with men at all. She really would rather be running around with her girlfriends and her animal friends. She was known as the mistress of beasts,
mm,
in that she could control, or she did not. They, I guess, control is a very Western term. She could
yeah.
communicate with animals,
Mm,
and to the point where um, you know, she was able to work in cooperation with them. I'll put it that way. um, but she's a very powerful character, who her tradition has run for thousands of years. Actually, the goddess traditions were actually initiatory paths for priestesses or young girls. What that
mhm,
means is that that was a part of our mystery school initiation system.
mm,
So what on some levels, what we would do is help people to awaken certain types of consciousness.
mm,
So there's an Artemis consciousness or an Artemis archetype, if you will. And that would be, once again, if you see a young girl, she likes to climb trees and, do all the rough and tumble things, she has the spirit of Artemis. That's what we would say back in, if we were using, terms uh, from back in the day. She has the spirit of Artemis. So what we would do is when the elders recognized that a person had a certain spirit for that corresponded with a certain divinity, like Artemis or Athena or Diana, um, then they would put them on that mystery school path to help them to further develop, their mental, physical, and emotional capabilities that go along with that spirit.
Hmm. Well, maybe
So
that's
so
the
let me
reason
ask.
why. I was gonna say maybe that's why they call me Cynthia because I do like being. Well, the whole reason why we was late because I was doing yard work. So there you go. So
Okay. All right.
So that brings me to something real quick. When we say that DC in creating Vixen or the cheetah from Wonder Woman would have the spirit of Artemis in that sense.
Yes. Yes.
So that's something else they basically stolen from us.
Once again, they definitely use the reference. They use it as a point of reference. Even to the point of, if you go back to the image of Seshat, and she had a cheetah print on her dress.
oh no,
Um,
this is a shot. It's a shot.
yeah, that
Yes.
one. Her dress,
Yeah.
if you notice, it has the cheetah print on it. That
Mhm.
cheetah print is
Mhm.
actually that's a sign of a priestess. We would
Mhm.
actually wear the animal skins because animal
Mhm.
powers were considered to be superpowers. Those were the original superpowers. To be able to run as fast as a cheetah, that's faster than a human. To
Mhm.
be as strong as a gorilla, that's stronger than a human.
Mhm.
To be able to fly like an eagle or a falcon, those were the original superpowers are based on animal powers. So
Mhm.
yeah, to when
Yes.
they wear certain items as the costume, they are taking from the original tradition that we
Mhm.
created. Even like DC with Hawkman, for one, he's a grand example. Hawkman is the light version of Haru.
Horu.
That
Okay.
right down to the,
Yeah.
the falcon mask and the wings.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Right.
That's wow.
And
That's
and the
really
sight, he could see as well, like
yeah.
him.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, but even if you think about it, like let's just take about like Superman and remember like back in the day when they used to do like the comics from like the 40s, and then
hmm
they started to do like movie motion picture, and they
hmm
like say faster than a speeding locomotive, and but then like they used to always compare some type of power to like an animal
yeah,
you know, fly like you said, like flying like an eagle and
hmm
sight, better than whatever animal got like
yeah,
the best sight ever in life.
yeah.
So like, yeah, no, that makes total sense. And when I know that you said that you're like wrapping up that particular work. I believe that this is going to be the final inception of it, correct?
Yeah, that's what I've been playing with the cover. That was the original. When I came up with the idea, uh, you see where it says coming January 2018. I clearly
Yeah, we're a
missed that
little late. Yeah, we were kind of late, but it's all good. Let's just
deadline.
go back in time,
I,
pre-pandemic.
right, I clearly missed that deadline. Um, However, this is one of those things that's been a labor of love. Like I said, it's over 400 pages. I have been working on it for several years. I had a few setbacks in the work, um, but I've been able to keep it going, and I've been able to bring it to some closure. And so that may or may not be the cover. That's the promotional cover right now. Um, but I actually got some pretty good response from it
Hmm.
when I tested it
Yeah,
out.
that's dope.
Yeah.
Ladies like the
No,
idea of
this.
like looking at something deeper.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I
Mhm.
was gonna say that cover is gorgeous. I mean, especially like, looking at yourself like, well, what one looking at something deeper, and then just like the reflection in like the water, and sometimes. I'm about to put on my philosophical hat right now. If you all just would, just give me a little leeway here.
Mhm.
Um, it's something when you're looking at yourself in water and how like your perception of yourself is kind of like a bit skewed.
Mhm.
However, another analogy or or metaphor when it comes to like water is that water is used to make one clean.
Mm.
And I can just even think of like looking at yourself in like a pool of water, even though like your perception of what you see may be skewed because like water is like very unstable in some cases. It still has a way to kind of like clean up your image. And when I hear you talk, especially about like, trying to find um, more of a divine or whole portion of like how one looks at themselves rather than what's been perpetuated, that's kind of what I get from it when I'm actually looking at the cover.
Oh wow! All right, Mr. Compass. Then that is a big part of the goddess tradition is reflection, reflecting
Hmm.
on oneself. As a matter of fact, the goddess Aphrodite is a goddess of beauty, and she's always shown, or she's often shown, holding a mirror, or looking at herself in a mirror.
Hmm.
And a lot of times they associate that with vanity. And she's just looking at herself. She just likes to see herself.
Hmm.
However, when you consider that the eyes uh, in ancient times were considered to be the doorway to the soul, the gateway to the soul,
Hmm.
then the mirror becomes a tool not just of viewing the outward appearance, but if you gaze into the mirror and look into your eyes, then it becomes a tool of self examination on the inside.
Mm.
Aphrodite, the underlying lesson of the goddess Aphrodite is that true beauty comes from the inside out,
Mm.
not the outside in. So
Right.
the whole idea of reflection is very important to the goddess legacy because it was a big part of once again self examination. You were often encouraged to look at who you really are. That's what
Right.
you have to get like when we're having these conversations about history and then we're going to correspond into today. It's like, well, let's get down to brass tacks. Who are you really?
Mm.
Who are you on the inside? Let's talk to that person. Let's develop that. And there were the tools and implements that we use. Once again, the mirror, the reflection pool, the water to cleanse oneself. That's a very all those things are very key to the Black Goddess legacy because be baptized with the act of baptizing yourself, going down in the water
Mhm.
is like returning to the womb. That is
Right.
symbolic of returning to the mother's womb to be born again. So the
Mhm.
process of baptism all by itself is a feminine goddess ritual.
Mhm.
Now, nobody told me that in my religious upbringing. I was baptized.
Mhm.
They didn't tell me that when prior to me being baptized, it had anything to do with the mother, but they did, but it was symbolic. When they talk about going down the water, being dipped in the water, and then like even in the story of Jesus, where after he was baptized, and this dove comes down from the heavens. A dove is a symbol of the goddess. It's a symbol
Mm.
of the feminine presence of the Holy Spirit. And
Mm.
so, all those once again, it's like when they tried to hide it, even it's like the symbols that they use. They're the symbols are so profound and they're so charged with so much meaning that they couldn't erase the legacy completely because the symbols are the breadcrumbs. It leads you back to the source if you know how to look at it.
Wow. Yeah, this is like such a powerful conversation, and I think that if one lesson could take from anybody, no matter what you believe, is like to me, it's that true value of one's beauty and one's everything comes from within. and and it definitely jives with my philosophy of life that you don't have to look outside yourself for anything. You can actually get everything that you need to be whatever you need to be is already within you. And if and I think that like a man or woman can really garner that particular lesson to search from within to get the things that they need in order for them to thrive in life. And
Mm.
that's what I get from it.
All right.
Yeah, I like the whole concept, you know, because in creating, dreadlocks, I have that same concept. We know dreadlocks is a blind superhero, and I use that concept because I figure everything that we see physically is a form of, self-destruction, to some degree, is what leads us to believe that that's who we actually are. And
Mm,
I have it where he actually have to go from within to actually define himself and dealing
mm,
with any circumstances that he have to deal with.
Mm.
So I like that whole
mm,
concept.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm with that
Absolutely.
100%. But I was gonna go back to the goddess concept, whatever, as well, as it relates to the goddess Nut, Nut, Kemetic
Hmm.
goddess, and we know that all the gods of Kemet have had sprang from this goddess womb. I like what you're saying is in the sense of being baptized and going back into the water, or coming from the water. We know that the goddess Nut is also symbolic to the universe as it relates to water and the universe itself, and the god Ra actually sprouted from the goddess Nut. How do you
Hmm.
feel about that concept? Does that tie into what you're writing as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As you mentioned, she is the goddess who gave birth to the goddesses Haru the Elder, Osar, Aset, Isis, Nephthys, and Set. She is their mother. And she is the cosmic mother, so she represents the cosmic waters, the waters above, if you will. When they talk about the waters above and below, Nut
mhm,
is the goddess of the waters above. Um, and she is the cosmic darkness, the cosmic womb, if you will. She's all the when we look up at the stars, we're looking at the inside of her womb. The Milky Way galaxy is actually they say that that's Nut, the goddess Nut. Um, and the Ra, the eye of consciousness arising out of her. Um, in some aspects, Ra is our sun, the sun that we see during the day. In some
mhm,
other aspects, Ra is the light of conscious awareness, the light of cosmic awareness, if you will. And so it is from the darkness of Nut from which the light of that cosmic awareness, the I am, like I am conscious, I am a being, I am a living entity, where that idea arose from, out of the night of Nut. Um, so yeah, it ties right in because it's all the as we stated earlier, all the traditions are related in some way, shape, or form. And so,
Hmm.
as being a part of the oldest tradition, the uh, and being the mother of goddesses, Nut being associated with the nighttime and therefore the moon. We had several calendars besides just the solar calendar that we go by today. We also had a lunar calendar and
mhm,
something called a Sothic calendar, which is based on the star Sirius. And all those things are related to the goddess tradition because that's where they found their origination, right?
mhm,
And
Hmm.
so the original knights were women. If you go like to the Knights of the Round Table, if you go, prior to the knights that you see on TV or in any movies, the original ones were women, and they were priestesses of the night. That's
mhm,
where the term comes from,
mhm,
and it
Hmm.
goes back to that tradition of guardians and being protectors.
mhm.
The knights, the women of the night. Women are very smart. They always have been, and
We
so
alright.
at times of calamity. You can't be. You can't be. I mean, with ladies, it's always just as it is with men. It's always the best of times and the worst of times. Y'all,
Mhm,
we all are capable of great and terrible things.
of course.
However, like imagine, you know, all the police, the army. Imagine tomorrow they're gone, and it's just us. It's just us and regular other people, right? Well, once upon a time, we figured out, well, we need to know how to fight. We need to know how to protect ourselves mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, right? Well, it was the ladies who originally came up
Mhm.
with these techniques for doing that. And they were based around protection of the mother and the son. Those are the two things that you need for life to continue. If everything goes gooey kablooey tomorrow, you need to protect women and children because that's how the next generation propagates.
Mhm.
Um, so the women and children came up with all these techniques for protecting themselves, and particularly you need protection at night when there are
Mm.
wild animals around and when people and all kind of things are creeping in the darkness. So the nights were they set up uh, the guardian system, if you will, in order to protect themselves during the night to protect their domiciles, which were really based. The word domicile is based on the word dome. We built these domiciles based on the dome shape or the omphalos. The omphalos is an ancient. It looks like a honeybee hive,
Mhm.
um, or a bowl upside down. A lot of our ancient homes were based around that system. So we would have one would be in the center, and then as the family grew, you would have these satellite domes that would become the the family core, then became the tribe, then became the community, and it eventually became something called the polis or the city. So the mother was the protector of the family. She then became the protector of the community. Then she later became the protector of the city.
Mm.
And that's how that tradition grew.
Wow.
Later on, you have where the man or her son became her designated guardian or her designated lord. They call it the lord of the land.
Mhm.
The lord of the land is the protector of the land. What they fail to mention is that the lord of the land is empowered by the lady of the land. You can't be a lord unless you have a lady.
Mhm.
That's very important. So
You hear that, gentlemen? You don't be a lord without being empowered by the lady.
you gotta have a
Okay?
lady. Right.
You
Just
gotta
like
have a lady
it's
to empower the Lord.
a woman who makes a man into a father. A man is just a man until you don't become a woman. You have to become a father through a mother. So the mom comes first. Once she bears your child. Now you're a father.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things that happen as a result of the association with
It- the- I want to go back to you can't be a Lord, sirs,
women.
without a lady. Okay? I'm not
Gotta
trying to
have a
put
lady.
the feminism jive on you. I'm just saying. Mr. Young just said it. I'm just repeating what he said.
It's
Okay?
historical. It's
It's just
historical.
it's historical. Damn it. Okay.
It's
Well,
like
you
royal
know,
tradition. It's royal tradition.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. I'm trying to tell these people. Anyway, we've been going on for a little bit over an hour and a half now, and I don't want to keep you all night long, but thank you again, Keith
You're welcome.
Young, Mr. Hero Keith Young, for coming on and really just like for a lack of a better term, blessing us with your presence and
Mhm.
sharing all this great knowledge that you have acquired over the time of years and that you have just imparted in us and all that great jazz. And I feel empowered to empower a Lord. Yeah, I do. I feel empowered to empower Lord. Okay, hollering at you, partner, our Lord. And so
All right.
but yes, but thank you, thank for coming. So if people want to follow you and follow your work, and eventually, snag a copy of your book when you once it gets out in the atmosphere, how can they do that?
Well, I'm on Facebook as Hero Keith Young. I'm also I have I don't have a website dedicated just to the book right now, but I do have a website. It's called afroperspectives.org. And on that website, I actually have a nonprofit where I do community-based lectures about topics similar to what we've been talking about this evening. Or I talk about once again, Black history prior to slavery is my focus, and we talk about the history, the arts, and the traditions of our people, which are broad. It's so vast as it relates to science, mathematics, engineering, the medicine, health and healing, spirituality. There are so many avenues for us to explore, and that I share that type of information on my website at Afro Perspectives. If there's information about when I'll be doing some, when I start doing lectures again, that information will be there as well. So people can find me those two places. I'm also on Instagram, same name, Hero Keith Young. I post pictures from the book every now and then, just some, my thoughts and feelings as I go through my life's adventures. But I definitely put updates about, you know, um, my book or anything else that I'm doing, in the public. You'll find it on Facebook, Instagram, or my website, afroperspectives.org.
Sweet. Well, all of those particular links to Mr. Young is going to be in the show notes. So people, you'll be able just to hit a click on the link and you'll be able to get to his website, to his Facebook page, and also follow him on Instagram as well so that you can get up to date for everything that Keith Young does. So, everybody, thank you again for tuning
Thank
in to
you. Thank you
yet.
for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming. And of course, Andre, you
Thanks for
already
coming on, Keith. We
know.
appreciate it.
Appreciate the talk. Thank you very much.
You already know.
Thanks again.
Yeah. So, and everybody, thank you again for tuning in to yet another episode of the Motor City Black Asia Comics, presenting a Chronicles of Revolutionary Nerd. Again, if you like the content that we do, please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell so that you can get a ding-a-ling-a-ling every time that we upload a video and premiere it. And again, if you like the content, please consider being a Patreon. All of those particular links are in the show notes below. And follow, subscribe, all that great stuff. Go to Mr. Hero Keith Young's website. Find out what's in the know, when he'll be doing lectures again. He is a wealth of knowledge, and I definitely enjoyed having you on.
You
You'll
know
do
I
it
did for
again.
sure.
Always. And with that, people, thank you again for tuning in. And until next time, we say peace.
Peace.
Peace, family.